Hello everyone, I'm Drew from Punch Magic, and I just got finished making my favorite games from 2017 awards, or list, or whatever you want to call it, and man oh man was that a hard list to make. Not so much because there were so many good games this year, I mean, there were a lot, but it was hard to make a list of my favorite games because there were just so many duds this year. 2017 wasn't the best year for games, especially if you're like me and you can't buy every single game that comes out. So yeah, this list is going to be significantly longer than my favorite list from this year. As I said in the previous video, everything in this list is subjective, so I don't expect you guys to agree with me on everything. Also, don't expect me to have played every single one of these games from beginning to end. I've tried to put games in this list that I've played at least a little bit, or at least know a little bit about, so that I can somewhat know what I'm talking about, but overall these are games that were just big disappointments to me, so if I didn't spend money on them, that's why, because they were disappointing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the dishonorable mentions, and then into the awards. Keep in mind that these are listed in order of how disappointing they were for me overall, which is why the first dishonorable mention, Wolfenstein 2, is at the very bottom of my list, because I really genuinely didn't want this game to be disappointing. I mean, back in 2014 when the first one came out, it was my favorite game of the year, and it was just a huge surprise. It had an incredible story to go along with really fun, fast-paced gameplay, so I really didn't see how they could mess that up. Well, apparently they just totally screwed the pooch with this one. I have played the first maybe 45 minutes to an hour of this game, and I thought it was fine, but I've heard that the kind of problems that this game has they just last way too long. You're at about 50% health for pretty much like a good portion of the game for story reasons. So yeah, I'm pretty disappointed, but I will still try this game out at some point. I'm still holding out that maybe my opinion will be different. So yeah, I would say if you're on the fence with it, watch other reviews and see what you think. Another dishonorable mention is a game that I actually did a preview of earlier this year, which was Ghost Recon Wildlands.
Cockholster.
Now, I still have really no interest in this game, but it's kind of getting a Rainbow Six Siege treatment. The developers have been keeping up with it, adding content. There's a new PvP mode in the game that's apparently really fun, because you get like the whole map to track down your enemies or something like that. I don't know if it's the whole map. I don't know anything about this game. All I know is that it was boring as hell when it first came out. I had no interest in it because it was just a complete slog to just get through the beta, let alone actually playing the game to completion, so I was not interested. But if I keep hearing good things, then I might actually jump on board. So keep at it, Ubisoft. If you keep supporting your games like Rainbow Six Siege, Assassin's Creed Origins, and Ghost Recon Wildlands, then you're gonna get really good faith with your player base if you keep doing this with your future titles. And my last dishonorable mention is Call of Duty World War II's multiplayer. I haven't done a full review of Call of Duty 2 World War II yet, even though I'm planning on it, because I really want to do a nice comprehensive comparison between it and Big Red 1, which is a game I reviewed earlier this year. But what I will say right now is that the multiplayer is still just a complete mess. I mean, the headquarters system just doesn't work. I mean, they finally got it to work where you're in your headquarters with other people, but even then it's really glitchy, it doesn't look good, and it's just kind of pointless. Add on top of the fact that the servers just seemingly can't handle any sort of load whatsoever. I mean, this game is incredibly laggy. You get dropped out of matches like consistently every other match. I want to like this game. I think the gameplay is great. I think the multiplayer gameplay is fantastic. It's the most fun I've had with a Call of Duty in a very long time as far as multiplayer is concerned. But the online capabilities of this game just aren't up to snuff. They can't keep up with the demand that this game has, which is very disappointing considering that it's a Call of Duty game, so of course you're gonna have a shitload of people playing it. So hopefully they can sort that out. That's why it's just a dishonorable mention and not one of my most disappointing games, because maybe they'll fix it, and at which point I think it'll actually be an incredibly enjoyable experience. But considering that Activision doesn't really have the same track record that Ubisoft does right as of late with supporting their games, I don't have high hopes for this one. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get into the awards. Starting with the Proving Early Access Haters Right Award, which goes to Hello Neighbor. Now this is a pretty cool concept for a game. I saw it start to pop up on YouTube like maybe spring of this year. All the big YouTubers were playing it, but then as I kept watching more and more people play it, it got way more complex than it needed to be, to the point where you're kind of scratching your head as to what exactly are the developers going for here. And the game finally left early access just in time for the end of the year. But once again, it's just a completely buggy mess. People are kind of wondering what the hell they were thinking releasing the game in this state. It is just still almost completely broken. And honestly, I just think fundamentally this game is flawed. At its core level, it's a cool concept where you have to kind of sneak around somebody's house to figure out things. The first few updates for the alpha or beta or whatever for this game were great. They were really good head scratchers where you had to think outside the box to get inside the person's house. But as more and more updates came out and it started becoming more of like a funhouse simulator rather than a breaking and entering simulator, it just got kind of weird. A lot of the puzzles revolve around you doing things that don't feel natural. They're not kind of like aha moments. It's moments more like, really? That's what I have to do? You essentially have to break the game or do things that you wouldn't normally have to do in an actual puzzle game, like glitch through walls and things like that to succeed in these puzzles, and it just doesn't feel right. It feels weird. I would just not recommend this game in its current state, and honestly, if they're going to keep going this direction with the puzzles, I wouldn't recommend it ever. Hopefully somebody else can come in and make this concept really work as it was initially, or maybe the developers can kind of reel things back, but considering they're in a 1.0 state, as they consider it, I don't see that happening. So yeah, big thumbs down for me. And coming in with the We Don't Know What We're Doing Anymore award is Agents of Mayhem by Volition. Now, I have to tell you guys, Saints Row 2 and the Saints Row franchise overall is one of my favorite franchises of all time. I love especially Saints Row 2. It's up there. Like it's such a good open world game that got such a bad rap when it first came out for being a GTA clone, but it's really good in its own right, and I think you guys should try it out. Ever since then, though, with Saints Row 3, they kind of went in a new direction with it, where they just said, oh, let's go all out crazy, and then they kept going with Saints Row 4, and now with Agents of Mayhem, they've just completely lost all direction with this franchise and with what they're developing. Agents of Mayhem is a game that really nobody wanted. It's a single player only experience where you're in an open world, but you can change between multiple characters. I don't understand why they didn't do an open world game like this, but it was co-op and you play as one character. You get to choose one character. I don't understand why they didn't go that route. Why did they make it so that you can just hot swap between all these characters? It's so weird. And add on top of that I've heard that from reviews that the world is completely dead, and just they're repeating mistakes that they've had in all of their games to just implement weird mechanics that nobody wanted or asked for. It's just, what was the point of this game? I don't see why anybody would be interested in this, because it's not Saints Row, which is what people wanted more of, and it introduces mechanics that people didn't want, and it takes away mechanics like co-op that were really popular in the previous franchises. I'm all for a developer taking risks and trying new things, but try to head in a direction that kind of makes sense for where you're going, or do something that's so creative that people have to check it out, which this game lacked any of that. So yeah, once again, big thumbs down. Next up, earning the Jump Scares Are Still Spooky, right award is Outlast 2. Now, I really liked Outlast 1. It was one of my favorite horror games until Resident Evil 7 came out, because they did a really good job of kind of mastering the run and hide simulator aspect of horror games of the time. I mean, it's kind of dated now, which I really think is why Outlast 2 just didn't do that well. Also, Outlast 1 was set in an asylum, which was a really condensed location where they could surprise you with different things, but they didn't have to go too outside the box with open environments, and that's why they tried with Outlast 2 to kind of bring it out and more in the open. You're going through cornfields and things like that to make it scarier, but most of the game just kind of fell flat. It was really unfair. Some of the enemies you ran from just could like teleport to you, or they would pop out at the most inconvenient times. And also, while the setting was unsettling, it wasn't necessarily scary, at least not scary enough to hold its own like the Asylum was from the first game, and the game really just relied too much on jump scares to really be an entertaining experience. It's overall just kind of a big disappointment. I wish that they introduced a little bit more mechanics to the game rather than taking the same gameplay from the first game and putting it in a different setting with a different story. They should have done all of that while also adding new mechanics, like maybe some sort of combat in the game. I think that that's what this run and hide simulator kind of needs. It's why games like Alien Isolation and Resident Evil 7 did so well, at least critically, is because they actually introduced mechanics where you could fight back, which is what any normal person would do in this situation, I think. But yeah, overall, Outlast 2 was just a disappointment, and you probably won't miss out on anything if you just pass. Alright, and earning the Proving Early Access Haters Right Again award is Ark Survival Evolved. Now, I know this game technically came out like years ago, but it officially came out of early access this year. All controversies with expansions and DLCs coming out while it was early access aside, this game is just a huge disappointment for me. It's one of the things where I actually think the developer spent too much time focusing on their hardcore player base, the players who have like huge high-level characters, huge bases, they've tamed every animal in the game, things like that, that they didn't cater the beginning of the experience for new players who are learning things. So you're kind of left with, as a new player, kind of scratching your head, not really knowing what to do. Also, on consoles, this isn't the most user-friendly experience unless you kind of join a big clan of people or strangers. It's really difficult to play with just your friends. I mean, you can clan up and things like that, but you need a dedicated server, and it's annoying. I want to just be able to play with my friends, and that was never really something that came to fruition, at least not while we were interested in playing. And on top of that, the progression seems kind of weird. The progression is almost like separated from your actual progression in the world. You can level up your character all the live long day, but if you're not taming animals and plunging into the depths of the map and building bases, you're not gonna really progress in the game at all. And I think it's that detachment in the gameplay that really puts me off and really is why I'm just not interested in playing this game anymore. I know this game has a thriving community behind it and people who really swear by its success, but for a new player like me, somebody coming in, it's just not a great experience. Okay, next earning the Really Should Have Been Better award is For Honor. Now, this is another game that I was really excited for, kind of like Ghost Recon Wildlands, and then I played the beta and it really just put me off of the whole experience entirely. It's interesting because I don't think at its core, For Honor is that bad of a game. It's really well polished, at least from what I played in just the beta, and the graphics look amazing, and they really put a lot of care and detail into the combat in the game. But there just wasn't a whole lot of content there. There wasn't enough to drive me to purchase the game. I mean, I heard that the campaign was short and kind of uneventful, nothing really happened, and honestly, this is the biggest thing for me. The combat just wasn't engaging enough for me, which is really sad because I was excited to try this game out because it was a new kind of combat style for games like this, and it just didn't grab me. Maybe it's because I sucked at it, honestly, but for the most part, when I was playing the beta, I was going up against people who were playing, everybody was playing as the same character, and they were just spamming the same attacks, and I'm, you know, a new guy who has no idea what the meta is or whatever, and I'm coming in trying to change things up, and I'm just getting demolished. And I hate it when games do that, when there is just one character you have to play as to succeed or you're just gonna lose. And for me, For Honor definitely had that problem, so I ultimately just put it down and I never even looked back at it. Even when I see it on sale now, I have zero interest to get into it. Once again, I know this game actually has a pretty big community of people who are behind it, and that's fine, but Ubisoft actually hasn't been showing this game as much love and support as their other games, so I don't know if this game is actually going to have as much of a lifespan as something like Rainbow Six Siege or Assassin's Creed Origins or even Ghost Recon Wildlands. And for the next award, you knew it was going to show up. Earning the Lord Microtransaction award is Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now obviously this is EA's version of Star Wars Battlefront 2, not the arguably much better and much more received and just much more beloved actual Star Wars Battlefront 2. Seriously, if you haven't played this game, get your hands on it. It's on Steam, it's super cheap. Play this. But yeah, I was super hyped for this game going into it. I mean, after Battlefront 1, which I actually enjoyed for what it was, I was excited for what they were going to do with the sequel, and for all intents and purposes, they reached what I was excited for. They have space battles, they expanded the customization of the multiplayer, they made the battles bigger, but they totally ruined all of that stuff that I would have liked. Even the fact that they added a campaign mode, they ruined it all by just making everything kind of pay to win in these stupid loot boxes. And I think that is the key problem here, at least for me. It's not the fact that people can buy the loot boxes and get better just from paying money. That is a problem, but the fact that your progression in the game is all just reliant on this stupid random chance box that you get every time you level up is really annoying to me, because it doesn't allow you to play the way you want to play. Sure, you level up and you get items, but that doesn't mean you'll get items that you want. If you want to play with this certain type of blaster, this certain type of trooper, it may take you a long time to unlock the things for that certain class. And so yes, the microtransactions are egregious, but from a pure design standpoint, right out of the gate, this game is flawed. And I think for them to take out the microtransactions is only fixing half of the problem with this game. And on top of that, a story mode that I actually watched. I watched the entire campaign mode just with cutscenes, and it looked incredibly just uninspired and boring. I actually liked the story arc of one of the characters in the story, but they never really did anything with it. They didn't go anywhere, they didn't break new ground. The campaign was just totally kind of pointless. I mean, it was better than what they've done in past Battlefield titles, so good for you guys, but I mean, if you're comparing something to a piece of shit, I mean, you're not really gaining much ground. So yeah, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is probably one of my most anticipated titles for this year. I was super excited for them to learn from their mistakes, and I do think they learned from most of their mistakes of Battlefront 1, but then they just added new mistakes into that really just overshadowed the mistakes from the first game. Moving on to the game earning the Why This Franchise award is Mass Effect Andromeda. Yeah, I have some explaining to do with this one. So earlier this year, I made a video that was very reactionary to the backlash that Mass Effect Andromeda was getting, especially in the early days before people had really finished the game or gotten to see all of the content. I say it was reactionary because that's exactly what it was. I was frustrated that people were just immediately throwing this game under the bus, despite the fact that it was from a new developer that didn't really have much experience, and it was a franchise that we all loved. I was willing to give the game as many chances as it wanted, and yet here I am still with this game at almost the top of my most disappointing games list. Honestly, the game just about halfway through failed to grab me, and I think it was because it didn't introduce enough that was new. Your player character in this game just isn't very interesting, at least not even like half of the amount of charisma that Commander Shepard had. And yes, I know the animations and stuff like that were really janky at launch, and they never really got to the point where they were good, but I was willing to look past that as long as the game had an interesting story and a good narrative. And I thought the gameplay was fun enough, so I kept playing, waiting for that narrative to catch up, and it just never did. Now, I have a friend, Matt, who has finished the game, and he said that the story really does deliver and it has some good closure, but I just couldn't see it getting there. My biggest problem with Mass Effect Andromeda is that they really only introduced 2 new races when you're going to an entirely new galaxy. Like, what the hell is that? How are there only 2 new races when our galaxy has like 9 different alien races that are all sentient? This one only has 2? They could have done so much more with this. And considering how many problems this game had during its development, I can kind of see why the story just is lacking any sort of substance. This game should have been put back in the oven for years, if not just totally pulled out and just kind of canceled. Would it have sucked to not get to experience the gameplay, which I do think is the best gameplay in the franchise? Yes, but at the same time, we wouldn't have had this game that tarnishes the canon and the world of Mass Effect. And just like other games in this list, I know there are a big group of people who genuinely loved this game, and I really commend those people, and it really sucks that those people now won't be able to get any sort of DLC or actual closure to the story like they were wanting. Yeah, overall, this was just a complete mess, and if there was anybody who watched my video earlier this year, and I convinced you to buy the game and you were ultimately disappointed, I apologize apologize because I ended up disappointed with the game, despite the fact that I wanted to love it. I mean, you guys saw how much I wanted to love this game, and it just couldn't get me. It couldn't grab me like the older games could. But overall, I could not finish this game, and I have hardly anything pushing me to finish it now, especially since there's no DLC coming out for it. Alright, and now on to the most disappointing game for me of 2017, earning the coveted I'm Not Mad, I'm Just Disappointed award. That is Destiny 2. Now, if you guys watched my favorite games of 2017 video, you will notice that I made Destiny 1 an honorable mention in that game because at the beginning of this year with Age of Triumph, it was just the best time to be a Destiny fan. I mean, the new game was coming out, we had all this old content to play, it was just a great time. We were able to enjoy the game at its fullest potential. And so I was super excited for Destiny 2 because I figured they would take everything they learned from Destiny 1, build on that, and just make an incredible game. What I didn't know, though, is that the team behind all of those great improvements to Destiny 1 had almost zero contact with the team that was developing Destiny 2. So what we were left with is a game that was very similar to vanilla Destiny 1 with just maybe some minor improvements, which was a game that left out all of the huge improvements to Destiny 1 that we saw over the past 3 years. But despite that, they still hyped the game up to all high hell, knowing that us hardcore players and people willing to give the game a second chance, and PC players who were never able to even try the first game would buy the game without second thought. And look at us now, we're all just so happy. Oh my god, I can't even begin to describe how disappointed I am in this game. I've been waiting a long time to kind of just spill my guts about this. I've talked about it in patch notes, I've talked about it on stream just a little bit, but I haven't really gone in depth of why this game frustrates me so much. First of all, the first month of this game's life cycle, I was having a great time. I liked the story for what it was. I mean, it's not breaking new ground or anything, but I thought it was cool. They played with the lore in interesting ways, and I thought the ending had some really good implications for the future of the franchise. But yeah, the content that was there, I was thinking, okay, this is good enough. They're gonna build on this maybe in a month or something like that. They'll add new content, and then when the DLCs come out, there'll be even more content. And even if I kind of get burned out, I'll just come back and have more fun. That's what I did with the first Destiny, at least. I played it for about a month or two, played it a lot with my friends, and then we just kind of stopped playing until the first DLC came out, and then we got back into it, and then we just played it until the next DLC, and then we just played it until the next DLC. And so I was expecting sort of the same thing to happen with this, but no. If you've never played Destiny 2, just know that once you get about 3/4 of the way to max power level, which is like separated from your actual level in the game, it just dictates what kind of content you can play and how powerful you are. That last fourth of grind is insane. It'll take you months to get there if you just play in a casual pace. If you grind and delete characters and really just push yourself to get there, you can get there in a couple days, but you will not have fun doing it. And I think that's a big problem I have with the progression system in this game is after a certain point, it just stopped being fun. I remember in Destiny 1 during Age of Triumph, getting your character to max light level was no problem. You could play whatever content you wanted to and you could get there. The challenge came from playing that content and trying to grind to get the certain weapons and gear that you wanted, not getting to that max light level. Whereas this game was a big focus on getting to that max light level, and none of the grind came from getting any of the gear or anything like that because they removed random rolls. Now, the random rolls in the game encouraged a lot of grinding, which some people didn't like. They wanted just every single weapon to be the same, but now that we've actually gotten to see what that's like, it makes the game incredibly boring with little to no variety. There's nothing that distinguishes this version of the gun that you got from a Strike from this version of the gun that you got from a Nightfall, even though the Nightfall is much harder and should have a better chance of getting you better loot. And on top of that, the game just doesn't provide enough incentives for you to even do this grind because there are no more random rolls, and you don't actually get drops from most of the content in the game, you just earn stupid tokens. And the token economy is probably my biggest problem with Destiny 2 because it provides no incentive, no catharsis, no any sort of satisfying feeling to any of the gameplay. You complete the hardest activities in the game, you complete the raid, and what do you get? Tokens. You get tokens. And then you turn those tokens into a vendor and he gives you a random weapon that you've gotten a million times over, and it's not the weapon you wanted, but you can't buy that specific weapon because fuck you, it's Destiny 2. They just took all of the heart and soul in Destiny 1, which admittedly was based mostly around the grind in that game, and completely removed it. They listened to people like Angry Joe from the Angry Joe Show, who hated the grind in Destiny 1 and just took all of that grind out completely, when I feel like Angry Joe would say that some of that grind deserves to be there. And yes, there is grind in Destiny 2. There is grind in getting your max light level, and there's grind in getting the forge weapons in the new DLC, but it's not fun grind. It's just grind for the sake of grind. And all of this, I haven't even mentioned the Eververse nonsense, which is getting to such a high boiling point now that people are asking that Bungie would just remove Eververse altogether. For those of you who don't know, Eververse is the microtransaction system in the game. Basically, it's a shop that you can go to buy loot boxes that potentially give you cosmetic items in the game. Now, there are other items like armor pieces and ghosts that give you certain bonuses, so an argument could be made that these are sort of pay-to-win boxes, or at least boxes that influence more than just the cosmetic aspect of the game. But gamers' biggest problem is that a lot of stuff that was locked behind challenges and things that you could do in the game in Destiny 1 are now locked behind just paying these microtransactions. I mean, there are tons of skins and shaders and things like ghosts and sparrows that are just locked behind this microtransaction loot box that you could have had access to in Destiny 1 by just grinding a little bit more or doing a specific challenge to make those things actually feel worthwhile. I do think that microtransactions can have a good place in video games. There are ways they can work. There are other games like Titanfall 2 where everything's purely cosmetic. It doesn't affect the gameplay, it just makes you feel cooler, and you do get free content along with it. But with Destiny 2, we're barely getting any new free content. So what the hell is the reason behind these microtransactions? We're not getting more consistent updates than we did in Destiny 1. If anything, they're actually getting less consistent now. We're getting them every few months instead of at least once a month. They're not adding new multiplayer maps, they're not adding new quests, things that are very simple that even Assassin's Creed Origins is adding weeks and weeks after launch. They're adding new quests and new things for you to do. So what the fuck is your excuse, Bungie? I think that their excuse is, fuck you, we got ours, you guys fell for it again, good fucking job. So will Destiny 2 ever get to the point that Destiny 1 got to? I'm sure it will. I'm sure there'll be another Age of Triumph for Destiny 2 where you can play through all the raids and you can play through all the endgame content. No, isn't this so fun? It's so fun to play, but I don't give a shit anymore. I'm done. I'm not gonna play it. And I will forever remember Destiny 2 as the time that I officially gave up on Bungie. Alright, and that is my list of 2017's most disappointing games. Oh my god, I'm exhausted. I'm losing my voice. I recorded both of these videos back to back and I'm just losing my voice. So be sure that you guys check out my favorite games of 2017 video. It's linked here. Also, leave a comment what your most disappointing game of the year was, and let me know if there's another game on this list that I should maybe give a second chance or something like that, other than Destiny 2. That ship has sailed. But yeah, next year I'm hoping to really improve the channel and add a lot more content for you guys on top of the content you guys already know and love. I'm hopefully going to review more current games. We'll just have to see how the budget works out and things like that, because I do spend my own money on this stuff. So yeah, we'll see if that happens, but I will keep reviewing the old nostalgic games. Expect the review for this Star Wars Battlefront 2, the old Star Wars Battlefront 2, to come out very soon. I'm going to be working on that. I'm still streaming through the story and things like that. But yeah, look forward to a bunch more content in 2018. I'm very excited for where this channel's going, and if you followed us earlier this year or supported us at all this year, thank you so much for doing that. But anyway, I will see you guys at the beginning of Season 2 of Patch Notes. Yeah, I'll see you guys there. See ya.